Yeah, folks, if there is something that points to deep changes this week, although when it comes to Trump, what is true today may not be tomorrow. The Middle East and all its complexity went through at least unusual events. And at least apparently it symbolized, like few times before, the isolation of the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, especially in an image that circled the world this week, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, shaking hands with the new Islamist leader of Syria, Ahmed al-Sharaa, a figure that, just so you understand, Israel labeled as an al-Qaeda terrorist in a suit. Trump did not hold back on praise. After the meeting with Sharaa on Wednesday in Riyadh, he said the following: "He has potential. He's a true leader." That meeting, by the way, was arranged by the Saudis, who also signed a series of agreements with the United States involving weapons, business, and technology. And that whirlwind visit of Trump through Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates wasn't just a diplomatic show marked by billion-dollar investments. No. According to 3 regional sources and 2 Western ones, it was the consolidation of a new order in the Middle East, led by Sunni countries, which is practically dismantling the old axis of resistance led by Iran and leaving Israel out. Let's remember, however, that the Sunni-Shiite dichotomy isn't enough to explain the complexity of the Middle East, so much so that the very axis of resistance includes representatives from both branches. The increasingly widespread criticism from around the world has made it difficult for the US to maintain its unconditional support for Bibi. That is, discomfort is growing in Washington with Israel's stance on Gaza, especially due to the lack of progress toward a ceasefire and the almost consensual perception that a series of war crimes is being committed by the Israeli government, not to mention the judicial assessments by the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. This trip by Trump was seen as a direct message to Netanyahu. According to those sources, the warning was clear. In this new American diplomacy, more pragmatic and result-oriented, unconditional support for Netanyahu is no longer guaranteed. Who said this? In so many words, was David Schenker, who was U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs during the Bush administration. He said, "This administration is very frustrated with Netanyahu, and that frustration is becoming evident. They are extremely pragmatic, and Netanyahu is not offering anything in return." These sources also made it clear that the United States will not abandon Israel. The country remains a vital ally, with deep bipartisan support in Washington. But the message is that the U.S. has its own interests in the region and doesn't like to see Netanyahu getting in the way. According to people close to the matter, this is not just about Gaza. The patience of the U.S. is also being tested by Netanyahu's rejection of U.S. negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program. According to people familiar with the issue, Netanyahu's office so far has not responded to requests for comment, nor has it made any public statements about this regional trip by Trump. Now, the spokesperson for the White House National Security Council, James Hewitt, said that Trump remains a friend of Israel. According to him, "We continue working closely with our ally Israel to secure the release of the hostages still in Gaza, to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, and to strengthen regional security in the Middle East." Despite that public statement, officials in Trump's administration have shown, behind the scenes, irritation with Netanyahu for not aligning himself with the U.S. positions on Gaza and Iran. And according to 6 sources, including regional and Western ones, these tensions between Israel and the United States had already been growing even before Trump's trip to the Middle East. It all would have started when Netanyahu went to Washington for the second time in April, seeking Trump's support for military strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. And what did he find out? That Trump was opting for diplomacy. It was a shock. Netanyahu, who has always defended a hardline stance against Tehran, was surprised and only found out a few hours before the meeting that negotiations with the Iranians were about to begin. In the following weeks, other signs came. Trump announced a ceasefire with the Houthis in Yemen, sought rapprochement with the new Islamist leadership in Syria, and during the Gulf visit, completely ignored Israel. All of this, according to the sources, showed that the historically close relationship between the two countries is indeed shaken. David Makovsky from the Washington Institute, where he directs a project on Arab-Israeli relations, summarized the situation like this. Washington and Tel Aviv don't seem to be in sync on the major issues as they were during the first 100 days of Trump's administration. Gaza is at the center of that division. During the election campaign, Trump was very clear. He wanted to see a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages before taking office again. But already a few months into his term, Netanyahu continues resisting the pressures. He not only refuses the ceasefire, but has expanded the offensive and still hasn't presented any exit strategy or post-war plan even after 19 months of conflict. And the result is there. The number of deaths in Gaza has surpassed 52,900 according to local health authorities. It's a number that shocks and that has been generating a strong international reaction due to the humanitarian crisis that has settled in the region. There was an expectation that during this Gulf visit, Trump could take the opportunity to present himself as a peacemaker and perhaps announce a deal to end the war. But that didn't happen. Netanyahu maintained his position. He remains determined to destroy Hamas, which, as one of his own aides once said, is a utopian mission. In addition, he continues to be the target of a warrant from the International Criminal Court for war crimes in Gaza, and is also facing a corruption trial in Israel, which he denies. And while Trump was wrapping up his visit, Israel launched a new offensive in Gaza precisely on Friday. Israeli airstrikes killed hundreds of Palestinians in recent days. Another important point, the expansion of the Abraham Accords, which are those normalization treaties between Israel and Arab countries. That was a key goal for Trump, especially to include Saudi Arabia in the deal. And here, it's worth a note. The name Abraham Accords comes from the fact that, according to both religions, Abraham would be the father of both nations, the Arab and the Hebrew, or Israel, through his two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. But it seems the Chaldean patriarch has still not managed to bring his children closer together. The expansion of the accords stumbled upon Netanyahu's position. Riyadh made it clear that he would not normalize relations with Israel while the war continues and there is no clear path toward the creation of a Palestinian state, something Netanyahu categorically rejects. David Schenker summed it up like this. He has no strategy, no plan for the day after in Gaza, and he is getting in the way.